At that point, the realization, once we got away from it, the realization of what had just happened hit me, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. And I was standing there in the middle of the highway, and the operator of the tender was out. He had some water, bottled water for us, but I just started shaking. And at the time, I had 3 kids at home, plus my wife, and all my thoughts were turned to them.
Stay tuned. Coming up, it's a flashback to episode 45 in my interview with Captain Dave Martin discussing being overrun by a fast-moving wildfire and how he narrowly escaped death. But first, let's hear from our amazing sponsor, Midwest Fire. Midwest Fire, a factory direct manufacturer. That means no middleman. You work directly with the good folks right at their factory in Laverne, Minnesota. If you want to see just how easy it is to design your own Midwest Fire truck, check out the Create a Spec tool on their website. To get started, go to MidwestFire.com and click on the Create a Spec tab at the top of the homepage. Hello and welcome to the Situational Awareness Matters Show, episode 343. I'm your host, Rich Gasaway. The purpose of this show is to improve situational awareness and decision-making for individuals and teams who work in high-risk, high-consequence, time-compressed environments with changing conditions. The SA Matters mission is simple. We want to help you see the bad things coming in time to prevent bad outcomes. Let me pause here on the front end to acknowledge that I may sound a little short of breath during today's episode. I developed a cough and a wheeze about 2 weeks ago, and I've had 2 negative COVID tests, but the chest x-ray revealed that I have pneumonia. So I apologize for being a little winded, and I'll do my best to edit out where I cough. Today's feature segment is sponsored by Gasaway Virtual Training. We have 33 online training programs for your members. Some of the programs are live events presented virtually, and some of them are pre-recorded programs. To learn more, visit samatters.com website and click on the Virtual Training tab. All right, let's jump into today's feature segment, a flashback to episode 45 in my interview with Captain Dave Martin discussing being overrun by a fast-moving wildfire and how he narrowly escaped death.
It was August 11th. I was up in the hills doing some scouting, getting ready for bear hunting, and was on my way back out of the hills. It was a nice, bright, warm day, and as I rounded the corner and got on the highway out of the hills, I noticed a very large nuclear column coming up, what appeared to be up on the reservation above the town of Toppenish. And as I progressed down the highway, I had my portable radio with me. As it was a day off, I was just out playing. My radio with me, so I turned it on, started listening, and realized that there was a good fire starting to build up on the reservation up off of Highway 97. And Highway 97 runs between our area in Toppenish, Yakima, all the way down to the Columbia River and the Oregon border. And it was about milepost 46, and our town, the area around Toppenish, is at milepost 60, to give a little perspective there. Okay. As they were calling for more help, they requested units from our fire district and had asked for a Type 6 brush rig and an off-road 6x6 tender.
Hey, Dave.
Yes.
For us non-wildfire people, what's a Type 6 brush truck?
A Type 6 brush truck is basically a pickup truck.
Okay.
With ours are 280-gallon tanks with a anywhere from a 5 to a 15-gallon per minute pump on them.
Okay.
And so I called into our dispatch and advised them that I was available and would be headed that way with a stop at home to grab some equipment. And found out as I was headed down to my house to get some gear that the fire had started around 2, and now it was about 4 o'clock, 1600 in the afternoon. Responded to the station and got on the 6x6 tender, which is a 1,500-gallon tender on a 6x6 chassis. Has a front gun and then what we call sweeps on the side, which allows you to run about a gallon per minute in a mist off the sides of the truck. Also, along with a 50 GPM pump or a 50 GPM nozzle on the front of the truck.
Okay.
And we responded up the highway, myself and one of the volunteer captains. I was on the engine as the officer. Responded up there, checked in at the incident command post, which was right along the highway, and was assigned just to keep the fire from jumping the highway. At the time, the winds were probably 10 to 15 miles an hour blowing against the highway. And so we were assigned to keep it from jumping the highway, and actually still had traffic moving through the highway, which is a pretty busy highway, especially that time of year. So it kind of got a little challenging as we were moving through there. We did that for several hours, and then it was about, I believe around 2100 that we got reassigned to assist with a burning operation. And so at that point, we'd had several air tanker drops, so the fixed-wing airplanes had come in and dropped, I think about 6 to 10 retardant drops on the ridge above us. And the goal was to hold the fire between the highway and the ridge above us and try to keep it in that 1,000 to 1,500 acre range. We were, like I said, reassigned to do a burning operation, and the goal for us as we were burning along the highway was to reinforce the line against the highway. So the highway was our control line, basically the line that hopefully would keep the fire from jumping across to the other side. And they were bringing a control line down off the top of the ridge with a dozer. So the bulldozer was putting in a line, and their plan was to burn off that line. So we got set up, and my tender operator was going to be our support person. Got our drip torches, which is basically a 2-gallon can with a wick on it, and dumps a mix of diesel and gasoline out of it. You can adjust the rate so you get a steady stream or just drops, and it crosses the wick, and that puts the fire down on the ground. In the area that we were in, there's 2 fences. One fence was put in by the tribe. There's a large population of wild horses in the area. So they had put in a fence along the highway, and then the highway transportation had put in a fence. And both fences were I shouldn't say both. The tribe's fence was a 3-wire barbed wire fence. And the state's Department of Transportation fence was a 4-wire barbed wire fence. And there was roughly 30 feet between the 2 fences. And our goal was to burn, like I said, as much of the fuel between the road and the ridge as we could, to get rid of it, do it under our control, and hopefully that would be able to at least keep the fire from jumping the highway and let it continue to burn out between the ridge and the road. We got set up, got all our stuff in place, and of course we stop and have a briefing. Our briefing, because of the distance between us and some of the other crews, was over the radio. And our briefing basically consists of the current weather, wind conditions, which at the time the wind was blowing up slope and away from the road, which is ideal conditions for us. As we put the fire on the ground, it carries it away from our control line and hopefully up the ridge. And then who's in charge of the burnout operation, how many people are involved in it, which for us there was 2 of us, and there was 4 people up on the ridge, so a total of 6 of us. And the ridge above us and the area is all sagebrush and what we call cheatgrass, which is a really thin, almost wheat-looking type grass. And so the fuels were from a fine, very volatile, to what we would call a medium fuel in the sagebrush. However, that time of year, the sagebrush is very oily, and it basically burns like gasoline once it gets started. And so the hope was to carry that fire through the fuel and keep it low intensity along the ground, and that was the plan. Try to keep it from really burning up the sagebrush, but take out the finer fuels to reinforce that control line. So that was the plan with the briefing that we did over the radio. Everybody confirmed that, yep, we're good, we're ready to go. Our support units, vehicles were in place, and once everybody got started, it was a go. And they were going to wait for us to get about a half mile down the road, traveling from the north to the south along the highway. And now at this point it's dark also, so our only references to where everybody's at is headlamps or headlights from vehicles or the fire that was burning. We got set up, and my partner was very adamant, for whatever reason, and we've discussed it, and he's still not sure why, that he wanted to be between the 2 fences. My gut feeling was this is not a good plan. It was going to potentially get him in a bind if we had to get out of there.
Hey, Dave.
But he was, yes.
When you said your gut feeling, what did you mean by that?
I just didn't feel good about it. As he talked about it, the hair was standing up on the back of my neck. It's like, no, this isn't good. We can't have you between the fences because you don't have an escape route.
Okay.
No place to go.
Did you stop it?
We had a discussion. I told him I didn't feel good about it. Him being more seasoned and senior in the wildland environment than myself, he was very adamant that, nope, we're good. This is where I need to be. And I didn't push the issue anymore after that.
What do you think your gut was telling you?
My gut was telling me that something was going to go bad, and we're going to have a problem. It really was. And this person was a member of the tribal fire management, and we were working for them at the time. So, unfortunately, my followership kicked in, and I said, okay, he's in charge, and we moved on with our operation.
Okay. Go ahead.
So he got in between the fences, and so it made me nervous. I was constantly looking for spots in the fence to get him out if something did go bad. And we started our burning operation, and we did. When we burn, we stagger ourselves. So he was closer, he was farther away from the road than I was. On our escape route at that point and safety zone was on the road. It's a 60-foot highway, and we felt comfortable that if we got out to the highway, we'd be okay. We also had the 6x6 tender out there to protect us if something did happen. So he was farther up the hill from me, in between the fences. So he was out in front of me, putting down fire, and I was staggered behind him about 20 feet. And that way, if something did happen, there wasn't fire directly below him, and he would have a spot to get out in front of my line of fire that I was putting down. And we went about, I don't know, I bet we probably got about a mile or so into the operation. And they, at a half mile or so, they started bringing the fire down off the top of the hill. And so they were burning the same style. There was 3 of them, plus a burn boss. So they were staggered out. Same kind of deal with the dozer line being their safety zone. And as we were going along, the wind kind of started to shift a little bit. It would blow downslope, but not more than about 5 or 6 miles an hour, which really wasn't making a huge effect on what we were trying to do. And then about, 5 minutes later, after we noticed the wind had started to kind of move around and shift a little bit, it stopped. There was no wind at all. And looking back, that was a key thing that I missed, is that once the wind stopped, there's a very high probability of a direction change of the wind, a solid, hard direction change. We continued on, and I would say probably 30 minutes into our operation, the entire hillside just lit up. Wind shifted drastically quickly, and the fire from the top of the ridge and the fire that the folks were putting down on the ground along the dozer line just erupted. And we probably had a fire line that was 20 to 30 feet high and 20 to 30 feet wide as the wind was pushing the fire across through the fuels. At that point, we were trying to hurry up and get as much fire on the ground as we could, because now it's a concern of the fire running to the road, jumping the road, and taking off up the other ridge side. And as we were going along, I'm yelling at my partner, let's go, it's time to get out of here. He was pushing to get as far down as we possibly could. Finally said, all right, enough is enough. And at that point, the fire was probably 100 yards from us, which in hindsight is way too close. So he said, go to the road. I had about 20 feet between me and the road. I made it out to the road. As I hit the road, I heard him holler for me. And I turned around and looked, and he was hanging in the 4-strand wire fence, tangled up in his line pack, his wildland fire shelter, and all the other gear that he's carrying on his back. And I turned and looked, saw the fire coming, and at that point, I made a decision that I was going back after him, and we were both either coming out or we both weren't coming out. I wasn't going to leave him there. As I'm going up, I'm a million things going to my brain. Are we going to have to cut the fence? Are we going to have to cut his gear? All I had to do that with was a Leatherman hanging on my belt. I had my Leatherman in my hand and was considering pulling my fire shelter with my other hand, and the fire shelter being the large aluminum shelters that is basically a last-ditch effort in a wildland fire if you get trapped to protect you. We call them the baked potato sacks, for lack of a better term. As I'm running up there, I'm thinking, how are we getting out of this? I'm noticing now that his shirt and his pants are both caught in the barbed wire. As I got to him, he is in a sheer and complete panic. He's realized that the worst has happened. We can feel the heat. The smoke's coming down on us. Embers are hitting us. I can feel the embers hitting me in the face. Fortunately, everybody's wearing eye protection. But when the embers are hitting you in the face and you can feel the heat from them, you're very close to the fire, because the embers, as they blow away from the fire, they cool off pretty quickly. I can feel the heat hitting my face as the chunks are hot hitting my face. I get to the fence, grab the fence and pull it up, and it was able to separate his shirt and his pants from the fence, but his pack is still tangled in there. So I just start cutting nylon, and we're able to get him freed from his pack and drop the pack. We literally cleared the fence as the fire hit us. Fortunately, just a little sunburn. Dumped his pack, dumped my equipment. I had a combi tool, which is a shovel pick type tool in my hand. Dropped that. We hit the road and laid down in the middle of the road. As we laid down in the road, the fire's right there. It's laying over the road. We're laying on our bellies in the road. It's smoky. The tender operator knows that we've gotten in trouble, and I can hear the backup alarm coming down the road towards us. At that point, I hollered on the radio for him to stop right where he was at, because I had absolutely no idea how close he was. The roar of the fire was covering his backup alarm. I could just barely hear it. And myself and my partner are yelling at each other back and forth, just because it's so loud at that point.
I assume you're not in a shelter?
No, we are not in our shelters. We laid down in the road with the hope that the road would give us our safety zone, and it did.
Why? I'm not a wildland firefighter, so I can ask dumb questions. Why wouldn't you deploy your shelter?
At that point, I think my thought process was, we're to the road, we're safe. We're safe where we're supposed to be.
But that fire is going to blow over you, right?
Correct. But we had it in our heads that was our safety zone. At least I did. And in a safety zone is an area where you shouldn't have to deploy a shelter. And I think it was that thought process that kept me from deploying my shelter. And in hindsight, again, probably should have. We should have deployed once we hit the road.
Did he still have his, or did it get left behind, tangled up?
It was left behind.
Can two of you fit in one?
It would have been tight. Fortunately, he's smaller than I am, so yeah, we probably could have made that work.
Okay.
And one of the pictures that you have is of his gear burned up that we took after the fact.
Oh, okay. I looked at that picture and I thought it was I thought it was the debris representing where the fire started.
Nope, that was his line pack burned up.
Wow. He would have never survived.
No, he would not have. Neither one of us would have, I don't think. Even if we'd gotten a shelter deployed right there, just because of the intensity of the fire.
Well, he was still hung up on the. If you'd have had to deploy there, he'd have been hung up on the barbed wire, and he would have never been able to get down flat on the ground, right?
Correct. Yep, we would have just done it as a shield, and that was one of the many thoughts that went through my head, was to throw that thing up as a shield. But didn't think about it. Like I said, once we hit the road, we felt that we were safe. And for the most part, the fire was, everything was blown over to the top of us, and we were low enough. Again, not an excuse, but we managed to make it work.
Did the embers burn you?
The embers were bouncing off our face. You could feel them when they would hit. They were hot, but nothing lasting. It was, everything we ended up with was more like a sunburn. So hollered at the tender operator to stop, because I had no idea where he was at. He didn't know where we were at. Once the intensity of the fire settled down, we were still in the smoke, but the heat was, for the most part, was bearable. It was gone. We got up, and I asked him to honk his horn so we could get a better idea where he was at in the tender. And we got to the tender, which at that point where he stopped was less than 30 feet away from us. And we got to the tender, used the tender as a shelter, and he had already been flowing some water, so that area had been cooled down considerably. Moved down to the south about 100 yards and got out of the fire and away from the smoke and everything else that was going on. And got on the radio, let everybody know that we were okay, we were out, but we were no longer going to be able to continue our burning operation, and it was done. And why the fire didn't jump the highway, I don't know, but it stayed where it was at. At that point, the realization, once we got away from it, the realization of what had just happened hit me, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. And I was standing there in the middle of the highway, and the operator of the tender was out. He had some water, bottled water for us, but I just started shaking. And at the time, I had 3 kids at home, plus my wife, and all my thoughts were turned to them. And as with many people, it's like, okay, if that hadn't turned out the way it did, who was going to take care of them? Who was going to go tell them? Actually, was what I was more worried about than anything else.
What was your partner saying at that point? I mean, maybe it doesn't come at this point in the story, but at some point in the story, does it come back to you and him having a conversation about him being between the fences?
It does.
Okay.
It does. It comes later.
I know. I'd be warming up a slap.
He just looked at me and he said, "I'm sorry," and that's all he could say at the point. I mean, we were both at that point realized what probably should have just happened but didn't happen. And he just looked at me and said, "I'm sorry." And so we kind of collected ourselves, and the incident commander of the fire, who was one of the tribal fire management folks, he came down off the hill along with the safety officer. And we got with them and let them know what happened, explained to them the intensity of the fire had considerably reduced by then. Again, another wind shift which started pushing the fire back away from the highway. And we went up and showed him where everything happened. My tool that I had dropped, for some reason, managed to fare well, just a little bit scorched. But as you can see in the picture that I sent you, his gear basically burned up and melted everything right there on the spot. Had a discussion with them. IC wasn't very happy with my partner once we told him the whole story. But as he said, he goes, "Well, everybody's okay. Let's regroup. We'll deal with all that later." And so we pulled back, myself, my tender operator, my partner, and then a couple of the other guys pulled back. And I was able to get into a place where I had cell service, which was in and out, and was able to call home because I knew that at home my family had probably been listening to the radio. Mm-hmm. And the TAC frequency that we were on, they wouldn't have heard that, but if anything went out over the main repeated frequency for the tribe or ours, that we'd been in trouble, she would have heard that. My wife would have heard that. So I wanted to make sure that she knew that I was okay. And once we were done up there, I'd be coming home. So
had she heard it?
No, she had not. They didn't put anything out over the main radio. It was all on TAC frequency, which is a line of sight frequency. So fortunately, she hadn't heard anything. And she usually, when I'm out on incidents like that, as probably most spouses do, doesn't sleep well and sits at home and listens to the radio. So fortunately, she didn't hear anything that was going on, so she had no clue. I just told her, "Hey, there was an incident. Everybody's okay, and we'll talk about it when I get home." And so she was good with that. Regrouped, got a chance to get some more fluids in us, get something to eat, and starting to make a plan just to sit on the fire for the rest of the night. They decided not to do any more tactical operations, just sit. So I kind of wandered off, let my operator, my driver, know where I was going, but wandered off a little ways and just sat down and was reflecting on, what could we have done different, ultimately, not been between the fences. And at that point, that's when my partner came over, and we had a stern heart-to-heart about what had just happened. And basically told him that I wasn't very happy with him at that moment in time for putting me in that position, but I also apologized to him for not making more of an issue about where we ended up being. As the statement goes, if it's predictable, it's preventable. And that was very predictable. And exactly what happened is what I was concerned about from the very beginning. But because of his experience and his adamacy that everything was going to be good, we moved forward with it. So after that, the rest of the evening was pretty quiet. We finished up the night. Day shift came up, took over, got to go home, and once I got home, told the story to my family, and my wife was hot. She was very, very mad. Not so much at me, but at my partner. And so it took her a little while to calm down and understand what happened and realize, okay, yeah, it happened, but everybody made it home alive. We're going to learn from this, and it's not something that's going to hopefully ever happen again. And in the days afterwards, my partner and I had a couple more conversations about it. And he just kept apologizing and apologizing over and over and over again for putting us in that bind. And there was just a localized investigation, and basically the outcome was, don't do that again. I don't know on the tribal side, fire management side, if there was any discipline that was given to my partner, but there was nothing on my side. I was able to tell my story a week later to all the rest of our career staff, and really have a good discussion about what it meant to have those clear safety zones and escape routes, and be ready for just about anything to happen.
Mm-hmm. What did you learn from this?
Well, probably the biggest thing is to trust my gut and be very adamant that if it doesn't feel good, it's probably not good, and to make a bigger issue about it, and even to the point of, saying, no, I'm not going to be part of this if the issue's pushed farther.
Now, in the wildland community, I assume, well, maybe I shouldn't assume, but, there's the 10s and 18s. You're familiar with that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
That's the rules we live by.
Yeah. Okay. Well, isn't among those, I don't have them in front of me, but isn't among those rules that, if you're not comfortable with something, that, you have a right to be heard and have that addressed?
Yep.
So would you say some aspect of the 10s and 18s weren't followed?
Oh, I would say several aspects of the 10 and 18s weren't followed. Yep.
Okay, I'm grabbing them now. I happen to have them here on my.
Okay, yeah, I should have grabbed mine. I don't have them in front of me.
That's all right. I don't have them committed to memory like I'm sure many wildland firefighters do.
And I can probably get most of them, but not all of them.
Okay. I'm trying to see what applies to, having your concerns addressed. Now, this person, they outranked you?
In the wildland environment, yes.
Okay. So, and like number four for the standing firefighter orders is identify escape routes and safety zones and make them known. So when he went down between those fences, there was no way out.
No, there wasn't, and that was part of the discussion that we had. Is that you don't have a way out. He goes, "Oh no, I can get over the fence, no problem." And okay.
But you doubted that.
I did, and I told him that. I said, I'm worried about that. I'm concerned that you can't. He goes, nope, no problem. I crawl over these fences all the time.
All right. So you learn to trust your gut, learn to make a bigger issue out of your concerns. What else?
Yep.
What else was learned from this?
Well, we don't. That probably we will be stopping burning operations sooner. Once that wind started shifting and changing, that was our clue that something's going to happen, and we need to stop. And so that was a big thing. That was another learning point for me, is that pay attention to that, and when it happens, go with it. Don't continue. Stop and let the winds do. We were kind of in a canyon, so we had the issues of it swirling anyway. But when that wind stopped blowing altogether, that should have been the number one clue for us. But we got tunnel visioned or focused on getting that fire tied into the dozer line, so it didn't continue to get bigger.
Okay. What you described as tunnel vision, I would describe as either task fixation or mission myopia. So task fixation, being so fixated on one task that you're doing that you're not paying attention to the environment around you. Mission myopia would be one where you are so dedicated to the mission of what you're trying to accomplish that you're not paying attention to changing conditions, or even if you notice that conditions are changing, you choose to ignore them because you're wanting to get that mission accomplished. Would you say either of those were in play for you here?
Yes, for sure, and probably a little bit of both.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely wanted to get, especially for my partner. I mean, he's looking at it at a little different angle, being that's what their job is, to protect those lands and those resources. But both of us, we were both very fixed on getting that mission done.
And if that fire would have overrun you guys and caused you to get hurt, that would have set the whole mission back.
Oh yeah, it would have turned the whole thing on its tail.
Organizationally, do you guys do anything different now as a result of this event?
I think on the tribal side, they are a lot more oriented to do we need to do this? They're a little more apt to do a little better risk management on their tactical operations because of that. And there were some other incidents that they had that had happened actually that same year, I think, that kind of pushed them to be a little more less aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
And a little more focused on, do we really need to do this? It sounds, I don't know, it may sound odd to people listening that, all we're doing is trying to protect grass and sagebrush, but to, that organization, that's money for them. It's grazing land. It's the potential of it to get into the timber and loss of some timber sales. So, that's resources that they work really hard to protect.
Mm-hmm.
For us, as for our department, I would say in the last 4 or 5 years, this incident being one of them, some other things that we've had happen, we've stopped being super aggressive about going after these things, and worked at pulling back even farther if we have to make a 40-acre fire, a 100-acre fire, in order to keep resources from being out in front of the fire and doing some indirect things. We are certainly working really hard to do that within our organization.
Now, are the tribal firefighters trained to the same National Wildfire Coordination Group, standard training for wildland firefighters? Do they get that training?
They do. They get the exact same training. Matter of fact, we do a lot of joint training with them when it comes to taking the initial certifications and then moving up through the ranks. Yep.
Okay. Now, as I was looking at the watch-out situations, one of them is finding yourself in country that you have not seen in the daylight. You guys were in that position too, right?
We were, him less than me, but it was an area that I don't work in regularly.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely it was an environment that I wasn't used to being in.
Okay. You're lucky.
We're damn lucky. We are.
It seems like every time I've had the opportunity to talk to wildland firefighters who have found themselves in a tight spot, oftentimes it's because they are so committed to their mission. It might be hard for a structural firefighter to understand how a wildland firefighter could be so passionate about saving brush or trees, because maybe a structural person doesn't see the value in that. But for those who are committed to that mission, saving those resources are as important as any save made by any firefighter. And it seems that there are a fair number of occasions where I've talked with folks they're so committed to the success of the mission that they set out for that some of these circumstances overrun them, and only after the fact do they then share, as you have shared, I realize, although it's hindsight, all the opportunities to have done something differently.
Yeah, and and until I got into the wildland environment, where I started my service was urban, in a small community, and we didn't do any wildland. And so, it was definitely a transition, and it took me a while to understand, why are we putting so much effort into saving brush?
Mm-hmm.
But it is, that's their livelihood, and that's what those folks are hired to do.
Right.
In that organization is to protect those resources.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, Dave, thank you for sitting in with me today and talking about this. I'm always so impressed with how forthcoming those who've had close calls are willing to be with the information about what happened and how it happened and why it happened, and what they would see as their oversights or their the wish list of what I wished I had done in the moment that I didn't do in the moment that now I wish that I had done. These lessons are so powerful and so beneficial to the fire service, because out there is a firefighter who's going to go to a wildland incident and they're going to find themselves in the same boots that you found yourself in, and maybe inspired by you. When they get that gut feeling, they're going to speak up and they're going to hold their ground, and they're going to say, no, I'm not going to have happen to me what that guy had happen to him. So thank you for sharing that experience with us.
Oh, you're welcome, and I'm I'm glad and honored to be able to share it, because it's just like you said, it's an opportunity for hopefully somebody to learn, and hopefully somebody to put that into their mental toolbox, and if they do get into a similar situation, be able to pull from that and say, no, we're not going to do this, or whatever it may be, to keep them out of harm's way. More than willing to tell the story to whoever wants to listen.
Thank you again to Captain Dave Martin for sharing your experience with us. Since 2007, SA Matters instructors have helped more than 1,200 organizations and 87,000 individuals improve high-risk decision-making, including first responders, industrial workers, military personnel, business leaders, medical professionals, utility workers, highway workers, aviation workers, oil refinery operators, and more. If you or someone you care about works in a high-stress, high-consequence, decision-making environment, then we're here to help to improve their safety and survival, and to help them accomplish the most important mission of all, and that is to go home to the ones who love them. Since the start of the pandemic, I've had some amazing opportunities to present programs on the virtual platform for groups ranging in size from 6 to 400. Recently, I had the honor to present a live virtual training program for Red Deer Emergency Services in Alberta and the University of Maryland's EMS degree program students. It seems like we might be making the turn and returning to live events, and here's where I'm going to be upcoming. Actually, this week I was supposed to be at Clark County Fire District Number 6 in Washington presenting fireground situational awareness, but the pneumonia has me grounded, and the program will be rescheduled. November 17 to 19, I'll be at the Anchorage Fire Department in Anchorage, Alaska, doing 2 programs for the firefighters and 1 program for their communications professionals. November 24th, I'll be doing a virtual program with Andy Starnes from Insight Training. December 8th, I'll be at the La Crosse Fire Department in La Crosse, Wisconsin, doing a program on leadership called Leaders Toolbox, Building Tomorrow's Leaders Today. Thank you to the organizations who have allowed me to offer your members virtual training, and a special thanks to those organizations who are now hosting live events. If you're interested in hosting a virtual program or a live event, just click on the Contact Us tab at the top of the SA Matters homepage and I will give you a call. Finally, remember to check the show notes for how to subscribe to our newsletter and how to follow us on social media. There we share ideas about how to improve situational awareness, how to make better decisions under stress, and how to improve the skills of critical thinking and resilient problem solving. Well, that's it. Episode 343 of the Situational Awareness Matters show is complete. Thank you again to my guest, Dave Martin. Thank you to our amazing platinum sponsor for almost 7 years now, Midwest Fire. Thank you to our feature segment sponsor, Gasaway Virtual Training. Thank you to our associate sponsor, Chief Miller. And most importantly, thank you, the listeners and viewers of this show, for sharing some of your valuable time with me today. I really appreciate your support of the SA Matters mission. Be safe out there, and may the peace of the Lord and strong situational awareness be with you always.
You've been listening to the Situational Awareness Matters show with Dr. Richard Gasaway. If you're interested in learning more about situational awareness, human factors, and decision-making under stress, visit his website, samatters.com. If you're interested in booking Dr. Gasaway for a program, or if you would like to be a guest on his show, click the Contact Us tab at the top of the homepage.